guys have been through the paper, है ना. Paper 1 part A was comparatively on a difficult side, or some people who would not want to accept कि difficult था, वो बोलेंगे analytical था, है ना. तो मैं बोल देती हूँ analytical था, right. So paper 1 part A जो था हमारे प्रीवियस ईयर के एक्सपीरियंस के अकॉर्डिंग, अब ऐसा नहीं है कि एक भी इजी क्वेश्चन नहीं आया था, ऐसा तो नहीं है, लेकिन पेपर में आपको बहुत अच्छा बेस, बहुत अच्छा मेमोराइजेशन एंड बहुत अच्छा एनालिटिकल थिंकिंग चाहिए. आपको जहां पे 3 आवर्स में 3900 वर्ड्स लिखने हैं एक पेपर में, है ना. while everyone is going to try and tell you, क्योंकि वो तो हम तो फैकल्टी है, हम कैसे बोल दे कि डिफिकल्ट है ना. बट लेट्स ट्राई एंड कम फ्रॉम अ पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ एन एस्पिरेंट हु इज ट्राइंग टू राइट, प्रोड्यूस 300 वर्ड्स, रेलेवेंट वर्ड्स with respect to a certain examination of optional, है ना. जब उसे वो 3900 वर्ड्स प्रोड्यूस करने हैं रियल टाइम सिनेरियो में, उस टाइम पे पेपर का इस तरीके के क्वेश्चंस पूछना जहां पे उसको अपने ब्रेन में उस क्वेश्चन को टाइम देना पड़ रहा है टू प्रोसेस एंड टू फिगर आउट हाउ एंड व्हाट टू गो अबाउट, है ना, कि कैसे मैं इसको प्रेजेंट करूंगा, किस तरीके से इसे डील करूंगा. तो वो टाइम जो है वो इन्वेस्ट होता है और वहां पे पूरा ट्रिक आ जाता है. तो बहुत सारा प्रैक्टिस, बहुत अच्छा है कि अगर आप ऑलरेडी अपने पेपर में जाने से पहले बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस लिख चुके हैं, आंसर राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस कर चुके हैं, टेस्ट सीरीज दे चुके हैं, हर तरीके के क्वेश्चंस से आपका माइंड जो है वो फेमिलियर है. ऑफ कोर्स नोबडी इज गोइंग टू मैच अप टू द लेवल ऑफ यूपीएससी एंड नोबडी इज नोइंग क्या क्वेश्चन आ जाए. क्वेश्चन डायरेक्ट कभी भी नहीं आता, पर क्वेश्चन सिलेबस से बियॉन्ड भी नहीं आता. ठीक है, हमारे पास हम जब सिलेबस वाइज कवर कर रहे होते हैं ना ऑप्शनल सब्जेक्ट, व्हेन वी आर कवरिंग इट सिलेबस वाइज, तो व्हेन वी आर फॉलोइंग द सिलेबस वी आर कवरिंग ईच एंड एवरीथिंग, which means I'll assume that all of you guys will be having the notes of each and every topic from wherever you have studied, whether you have done self study, you grabbed some notes, you've taken some coaching, or you are, if you will take some coaching again you will be having notes. तो मतलब मटेरियल भी आपके पास अवेलेबल है. रियल टाइम सिनेरियो जो आपको फेस करना होता है एग्जामिनेशन वाला, उससे गो थ्रू करो, ज्यादा से ज्यादा टेस्ट दो, तो आपका माइंड जो है ना वो प्रोड्यूस करने के लिए ट्रेन हो जाता है गिवन टाइम फ्रेम में. न्यू क्वेश्चन, जब अब वो क्वेश्चन हर कोई फर्स्ट टाइम देख रहा है, द ओनली पॉजिटिव एस्पेक्ट इज कि अगर कोई चीज डिफिकल्ट है तो फिर वो सबके लिए डिफिकल्ट है, बिकॉज मोर और लेस बियॉन्ड यू हैव सर्टेन स्टडी मटेरियल फ्रॉम डिफरेंट सोर्सेज, यू वुड हैव कलेक्टेड इट. सिमिलर सोर्सेज आर अवेलेबल फॉर एवरीवन. And it's not like you all are equally smart itna to that you know where to look for when you need some material. More or less material is same with everyone, right? Material is same with everyone. More or less everyone is, all the serious aspirants who are appearing for mains examination, more or less they are going to study dedicatedly for almost similar number of hours. Fine, or they are going to have one sort of equation where we can say that there is certain benchmark to which a certain average person would be prepared for this examination. Where the change or where the difference kicks in is ki when you see a question for the first time and you know that you have 5-7 minutes, hardly 6 minutes to produce an answer for this one, how your brain works, itna hi game hai, right? So this is the training. तो इसके लिए मैं सबसे पहले तो बोलूंगी कि क्वेश्चन से गो थ्रू करना बहुत जरूरी है. प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं. क्यों हो जाते हैं? क्योंकि वो हमें एक फेयर आइडिया देते हैं कि ये मेरा टॉपिक है, यहाँ से क्वेश्चंस कुछ यूपीएससी फ्रेम करता होगा, किस डिजाइन में वो सोचता है, वो किस तरीके के क्वेश्चंस पूछता है, पहले मैं उससे फेमिलियर हूँ। अब वो क्वेश्चंस तो मेरे लिए पुराने हो गए, दोबारा तो नहीं आएंगे, बट मैं अपने माइंड को एक ट्रेनिंग दूं कि मैं नए क्वेश्चंस को फेस करूं। सो इसीलिए फेसिंग क्वेश्चंस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू फेस यूपीएससी के पूछे हुए क्वेश्चंस, राइट? सो वी आर गोइंग टू start with paper 1 part A. Today we have this discussion of paper 1 only. And in this scenario, while I have already mentioned that yes, it was difficult, also do not skip out on the information that not every question was as difficult. ठीक है, but PSIR के जो पेपर है ना वो fairly predictable आते हैं। अब ये वाला था कि नहीं था, वो भी हम एक एक क्वेश्चन वाइज हम डिस्कस करेंगे। इससे आपको पता चलेगा कि जब करंट अफेयर में चीजें हो रही होती हैं, अभी अगर आप लेट्स से होपिंग फॉर द बेस्ट केस सिनेरियो में यू गाइज विल बी अपियरिंग फॉर मेंस एग्जामिनेशन नेक्स्ट टाइम, एंड दिस इज द साइकिल ऑफ प्रेपरेशन दैट यू आर गोइंग थ्रू। करंट अफेयर्स दिस टाइम, all of that is going to happen hereafter before your mains examination of 2023, or all of that has happened already in this year. How do we pick up if this particular event or incident could be crucial from our PSIR optionals perspective, है ना? मतलब क्या कोई रेलेवेंसी नहीं थी, यूपीएससी ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछा था, क्या प्रिडिक्टेबिलिटी थी, या बहुत सरप्राइज एलिमेंट डालने के लिए प्रिडिक्टेबिलिटी हमें यूपीएससी ने नहीं हमारी अचीव होने दी? ये भी सोचेंगे। लेकिन फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन है वो तो हमारा एकदम स्टैटिक है, इट्स अबाउट सिस्टम अप्रोच। बस यही दो वर्ड है ना? ये दिस इज योर 1A, ठीक है। अब सिस्टम अप्रोच पे बात करते हैं। व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू डू इज I am going to clear this page and we are going to put it very systematically, है ना? 1A is your system approach. सिस्टम अप्रोच स्टार्ट कहाँ से होती है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल जो नेचुरल साइंसेस है ना, वहां पे सिस्टम अप्रोच को यूज किया जाता है। बायोलॉजी में, फिजिक्स में बहुत सारे सिस्टम्स होते हैं, ठीक है। वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू गो टूवर्ड्स दैट जोन, बट मेरा पॉइंट क्या है यहाँ पे नेचुरल साइंसेस से स्टार्ट करने का? एक पॉइंट था जब पॉलिटिकल साइंस का रिवाइवल की बात आई थी, उससे पहले भी एक पॉइंट था। रिवाइवल की जरूरत कब होती है? व्हेन समथिंग इज नॉट बीइंग रेलेवेंट, है ना? जब वहां पे रेलेवेंसी, आजकल रेलेवेंसी का बहुत टर्म यूज होता है। व्हेन समथिंग इज नॉट रेलेवेंट एनीमोर, दिस थिंग हैज टू बी रिवाइव्ड। बॉलीवुड से अगर मैं एग्जाम्पल हूं तो बहुत बार ना एक फ्लॉप के बाद, दो फ्लॉप के बाद जब उनकी बात होना बंद हो जाती है, दे आर नॉट इन न्यूज, दे आर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ डिस्कशन, these guys want to come back, want to have a comeback. It's like revival. So political science wanted to come back. It has to have a revival, and political scientists themselves, political scholars themselves, I should say, were very in this agony that political science is no more relevant. Not okay. People from the outside world were not accepting it as a science, and David Easton बहुत परेशान थे, right? He was like, I need to make political science more of a science. Of course, there are more people who wanted to do the similar thing. We will talk about them. But right now, what's the topic? It's systems approach. So, behavioralists जो थे, they were behavioralists. Let me write this keyword. I am only going to note down keyword and rest of the thing we'll do talking. Fine. So, बिहेवियरलिस्ट या बिहेवियरलिज्म जो स्कूल ऑफ थॉट था, क्या था? इट इन पॉलिटिकल साइंस इट इज कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ political scientists or scholars applying psychology into the study of political science. ये political के नीचे ही लिखा है, ठीक है? तो psychology they were trying to apply. Behavioralism or behavioralists, it is behavior is the term of psychology first of all, है ना? Behavior, we present ourselves, the mannerism, it is all part of psychology. Fine, the psychology is another subject that we are talking about. So we are talking interdisciplinary approach over here. Fine. System I am telling you they took up from natural sciences. Why? Because they wanted, behavioralists wanted to make political science more of a science. Fine. So for having this empirical approach in political science, they started looking for solutions. कि एक साइंस में क्या होता है या मैथमेटिक्स में सिंपली क्या होता है कि यू कैन पुट समथिंग इनटू अ फॉर्मूला एंड देन it is universal, right? You declare it and it is true wherever you apply. We can discuss. So David Easton came up with this systems approach and we can discuss and see if it gets, you know, its application into Indian political system or any other political system. We'll think about China also because contrast, closer and contrasting, right? So we will see how it works over there. Quick discussion में, but let me first draw. So you guys must be knowing कि डेविड ईस्टन ने बोला कि there is an environment, right? In the environment there is political system and in fact ये फीडबैक भी बनाना है ना. ये हमारा जो बॉक्स है, दिस बॉक्स रिप्रेजेंट्स एनवायरमेंट, दिस बॉक्स रिप्रेजेंट्स पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम एंड देन देयर आर इनपुट्स फ्रॉम दिस साइड लाइक डिमांड एंड support, right? So demand and support enter into political system through the people, civil society organization, political party. Now how they are entering, that depends from country to country, from political system to political system, but somehow demands are interacting with the political system, entering into the political system, and if they have support, so demand and support are separate over here, right? It's not demand plus support. A lot of time not every demand will get support if it is not getting support. Now here support is a term used by David Easton. If we want to relate it with the practical life, practical political systems that are working right now in the world, we can say it is political will, or we can say people, if we start thinking about US, then we can say people lobbying for it because lobbying is legal in US, right? So demand and support, if it enters into political system and there is support for a certain demand in the form of output, we will get decisions or policies. Now based on these decisions and policies, a feedback will be generated in the environment which will get back in the political system in the form of demand and support. This is the model. Everywhere you can apply. So he gave us a system, proper systematic model he is giving. If he is able to show how it works, if he is able to show a process, if he is able to put it into a diagrammatic representation, we are getting closer to what? Science. And that's what he wanted to achieve. है ना? You can create a diagram of digestive system, but can you create diagram of a political phenomena? He gave this diagrammatical representation to you. This means he is putting things in a manner which takes you closer to science. And now I'm giving you example from India, then we thought about US. Now let's see China में क्या होता है. China में what these guys do, there is a cell, local level cell of the Communist Party. There is one party rule in China, we all are aware. And you may think that every decision is being taken from the top. No, it is not the case. There are cells. There are provinces even in China. And so there are provincial administrations even in China. And then there is a central administration, fine, which is of course the apex. But there are local level cells which get the demand from the environment. Then they actually, do this task of communicating the demands to the provincial level. And if it's going to be handled at provincial level, provincial administration can make laws with regards to the same. If there is enough support, they can translate it into decisions or policies, or otherwise from province it can get to center and the center could make laws accordingly. Fine, because if Chinese, or they could at least get to know what is the current situation at the ground and frame their policies accordingly, whichever way the support is. See, there could be a demand X, the support could be for X or against X. The support could also say na that okay, X demand is there, we are getting this input and I think X demand is right. Let's have X translated into decision or policy. But if we are thinking, oh, at the ground level X demand is rising up and it is detrimental for our polity, fine, then we will say we support stopping X at the ground level. ठीक है, अभी चाइना में फिर क्या करेंगे, वो क्रश करेंगे, right? They will try to eliminate X. So that is also a form of support, but against X, and accordingly a decision or policy will be coming, whichever way the support goes as per the demand. Fair enough. Even in China, we can apply the same model. Now, if I can apply it to India, US, China, anything you think of, you can apply. Fine. So, abhi, even though I am to criticize this model as well, but for now, my job was, as someone who is telling you how to approach this answer, to convince you guys first of all. Only if you are convinced, only then you will be able to convince the examiner in the exam. So you guys look, pretty much convinced that okay, this is the thing. Ab hota kya hai? Not to brag about anything, I'm just putting it across that political science is one such subject. आसानी से भी समझा जा सकता है, ठीक है? So I have already been halfway in my explanation to the first question. होता क्या है कि स्कॉलर्स का काम है ना, जो हमारे लिए चीजें हम वो कुछ अपना एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी लैंग्वेज में हमें चीजें देके जाएंगे, हमें उसको डिकोड करके समझना है, वो स्कॉलर्स पे छोड़ देते हैं, है ना? जब हम एक पेपर एनालिसिस की बात करते हैं तो वहां से जब आप एक अच्छा पेपर एनालिसिस देखते हो तो वहां से आपको सिंपलर फॉर्म में जितना ब्रेक डाउन, जितना सिंपल आसान भाषा में बताया जा सके कि यूपीएससी क्या चाहता है उतना बेटर है। अगर आप कोई ऐसी वीडियो देख रहे हो जिसपे आपका माइंड थोड़ी देर बाद एब्सेंट माइंडेड हो जा रहा है क्योंकि नहीं पता चल रहा है अभी थोड़ी देर बाद कि क्या बोल रहे हैं, है ना, आपको ही नहीं पता है, आपको नहीं सिंप्लीफाई कर पा रहे हैं बिकॉज दे वांट टू शो देयर नॉलेज कि हमें बहुत पता है, हम वी आर द प्रो, राइट। बट द पॉइंट इज सामने वाले को, द स्टूडेंट हु इज देयर टू अंडरस्टैंड, उसको तो समझ आना चाहिए ना। Otherwise there is video, there will be a lot of views because then you want to see again and again if you can grab something. But every time if this is the same thing that for a 2-hour long video you are not glued and after some time the video is still playing but your mind is somewhere else, a lot of time you would have pressed back, you would have tapped on your phone to get it back, right, to certain point where you went blank, where you started daydreaming, right. So this was my point. I hope it was as simple as it could have been for you कि ये सिस्टम अप्रोच था। रीजन क्या था ये क्वेश्चन आने का कि एक सर्टेन टाइम पे पॉलिटिकल रिवाइवल हमको चाहिए था, स्टैटिक से क्वेश्चन है कंपैरेटिव पॉलिटिक्स से, ठीक है। और सिस्टम अप्रोच के हम बताएंगे एग्जामिनर को। नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू टेल कि यूटिलिटी क्या है ना। हम अब ये जो भी मैं कंटेंट आपसे डिस्कस कर रही हूँ, हो सकता है कोई यूटिलिटी बताना चाहे सिस्टम अप्रोच की राइट इन द बिगिनिंग, it's up to you. I'm just telling what all content could go into this system approach, which is just 2-word question. Once you have told the examiner, ideal thing is you please tell him that now that David Easton has given this system approach and you have also told him why he gave it, because political science was about to get revived and he wanted to contribute and he was very much enthusiastic about it, very much willing about it, and he produced a system approach. Very good thing he did as a scholar. Now are you able to really use it for your study in the political system in general? Politicians तो नहीं सोच रहे इसके बारे में। Organically the same thing is happening. They are thinking about the demand on the ground and they are making policies accordingly, because this is how David Easton has already told us, the students of political science or the scholars of political science, that or the political community in general, that this is how it is going to work. Fine, David Easton told us, but how it is useful for us? You tell the examiner that this system approach helps us compare different systems of, now let's say if you want to compare India and China, some standards you should know how you are going to compare. So if you have a system in place like this is a scientific manner in which how you can compare what is scientific? Least subjectivity, more objectivity. So from here comes in objectivity. You just have to put it into the formula, how demand is coming in Indian system, how demand is coming in Chinese system. You have to ask objective questions, right? And you will get objective answers. Fine. This is how it's happening, right? So with system approach, it forms part of comparative politics because it is helping you compare different systems of different countries. Okay. Now next, then what will you do? You will also tell that what happened next, what is beyond that, because there is structural functional model of Armand that is inspired by the system approach of David Easton, right? Towards your conclusion you can say that there is Armand's model, Gabriel Armand's model, that is structural functional model to further establish the relevance of this and to tell the examiner what was the update or development that happened after David Easton created this model. Gabriel Armand gave us structural functional model based on or inspired from David Easton's theory. When someone is inspired from a particular theory but still wants to update it, some problems he would have found out which were not going well with him. That's why he wanted to modify. So when required, you can also use Gabriel Armand as a critique of David Easton's model. है ना, उसको कुछ प्रॉब्लम दिखा तो उसने अपडेट करने का, मॉडिफाई करने का सोचा, उसने अपडेट, उसने he wanted to do something better based on this only, which means he was seeing certain problems which he wanted to rectify and make a better model than this. So that could also pose as critique for this. Based on that, you are to decide how you are going to use the material you have already studied and you already have with you, right? So material was always there with us. We just had to see how we are going to use it. ठीक है, मैं क्लास में कई बार बोलती हूँ कि एक ही बात पे जब मैं किसी बात की क्रिटिसिज्म कर रही हूँ, सिमिलर चीज को मैं गलत भी प्रूव कर सकती हूँ बेस्ड ऑन मुझसे पूछा क्या गया, राइट? नॉलेज सबके पास लिमिटेड है. वी हैव टू प्रोड्यूस विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द डिमांड ऑफ द question and how we want to approach it because mains examination is a written examination where it is a mirror talking, where you guys are talking to your examiner and telling him why I am the ideal candidate, why you should give me good marks so that I get selected. If that convincing is done through these answers, it is you to decide how you will use your knowledge to give examiner the answer that will impress. Fine. So there is some criticism that this approach has received. Scholars say that this is status quoist. As in this system we have given, we are not thinking about variables here. We have given, or David Easton has given this system and we were convinced with it, right? Just now we were convinced, right? You all are agreeing. So, but it is status quoist. What about something that does not fit into this model? There are certain variables. For example, what if a demand is getting fulfilled based on religion, caste, ethnicity? Now, if I have to tell you, I will say that is also a form of support, right? But it is status quoist and it is not giving space for anything else. It is telling you this is how it's going to work. While we are dealing with human nature, human behavior, and there are different forms of, political settings. There are monarchies. Maybe a monarch or a dictator is never concerned with what is happening on the ground. So David Easton, however, was in US. So this is also a critique that this particular approach is libertarian. So who all are going to say? Marxists, communists, everyone, socialist people, they are going to say another criticism is this approach being libertarian one. Fine. This is also a criticism. Then O.P. Young is a Marxist who is saying that this model is following very much of an advanced Western idea of how government works. Similar libertarian critique. Fine. So this is your criticism. Then towards the conclusion, will you conclude at criticism? Ideally, you should conclude at the point that although there are all these criticisms that we have, because after all we had to give in 150 words, we have been very quickly to this answer, right? And I'll start increasing my speed as we go further because this was just the beginning. I can't go hush hush. I have to, how do we work out? पहले थोड़ी जो easier exercises होते हैं वो करते हैं, फिर थोड़ा जो ज्यादा पावरफुल एक्सरसाइज होते हैं वो करते हैं, फिर कूल डाउन करते हैं. So that's the point. ठीक है, I had to warm you up. We were in the warming up phase. So this was relatively slower how I was approaching it. And you will say that this system is not applicable to many countries, but this system is still relevant, and how? Because based on this system, we study comparative politics. This system is relevant because it inspired further developments like structural functional model. So I have given you the knowledge. It's up to you how you are going to put it out in your answer, right? And why? What is the whole point of any paper analysis? What a faculty or a teacher wants to achieve from paper analysis is telling the students that the knowledge was there with you, and this is how you would have or you could use it further. Fine. So all this knowledge, all these pointers I have written, nothing I believe should be new. If something is really new, then this is not the right time. I have to discuss, let's say, X number of questions in 2 hours. Point is that you guys, whenever you are studying, this is the point of looking at previous year question paper. Right now it's your previous year, right? Now this question paper is PYQ for you. So this is the point. This is how you should think. जब पढ़ ही रहे होते हो ना, तो ऐसे कहानी की तरह ले रहे होते हो कि ओके हो गया अगला, उसमें से प्रोड्यूस करने वाला मटेरियल दिमाग में कितना वो उस स्ट्रक्चराइजेशन में अभी आ रहा है कि ये कहाँ कहाँ पे यूज हो सकता है. जब मैं स्ट्रक्चरल फंक्शनल मॉडल पढ़ती हूँ, क्या मैं उस टाइम पे डेविड ईस्टन के बारे में सोचती हूँ कि ओ दिस ये इसी के बाद क्यों है मेरे नोट्स में, राइट? So you will develop a thinking with regards to your answers. This is why we keep doing PYQ again and again. This is the, जब toppers बता रहे होते हैं कि PYQ देखो, तो उनका यही तो point होता है ना, you will get familiar with how to actually study, right? Now 1B, what is it? Cultural relativism. Story. Cultural relativism can be connected to multiculturalism. Mostly you guys would have studied it in your ethics, right? Or critique of human rights, right? Yes. Critique of human right. So this is what you have done with respect to cultural relativism. Let's say you were never expecting this question, and let's say this is the tough part of which makes if someone is facing it directly in the examination, this could be a tough end to crack. What will you write? Okay, if you are even aware about cultural relativism, something substantial you will write in the examination, right? So this becomes a task then, right? But interdisciplinary approach is always important. Fine. So who talked about cultural relativism first? The scholar's name was Franz Boas. Fine. He was a sociologist, so he gave us this concept of cultural relativism सबसे पहले. Fine. But he is a scholar, and we can always quote scholars for ourselves. After all, he is the one from where question is coming, and I'm telling you, you would have, it's not like if you are studying for mains examination, by the time, I'm not sure if you could relate it today, but if you are studying for mains examination, you will collect enough amount of knowledge and you will be a mains ready candidate by the time you appear for the examination. So chances are, only if you could relate it, or if you have not really missed out on it, for ethics paper at least you would know Franz Boas. And then now let's know what it is, right? Next question should be कि होता क्या है? चलो किसने दिया तो समझ आ गया. होता क्या है? So cultural relativism, I'm speaking about the introduction right now, जिसमें हम define ही करेंगे, because अगर एक UPSC ने term दे दिया तो ideal introduction is पहले examiner को बता दो कि मुझे इसके बारे में पता है, तो whatever examiner should know, whatever next is written in the answer is relevant. It's not, and it is worthy to spend my time on this question, and I should not just give marks and go ahead, है ना? So cultural relativism is an idea, you can also note it down if you want to, is an idea which implies in different spheres. Cultural relativism is an idea which implies that in different spheres there are different cultures and no culture is superior to another. Now, was it so difficult? If someone has studied multiculturalism, he or she would automatically know what cultural relativism is going to mean. So, can I say UPSC has only chosen to twist the language while the topic is fairly simple? And just twisting of the language could fetch 1 or 2 minutes from you in the examination hall, and time is costing a lot over there. Fine. So, under political science, it is coming from multifunctionalism. We can directly say that this is the school of thought, multiculturalism, school of thought, right, where I can relate it with my subject, right. Put it in the answer, what's the problem? Fine. Whenever we are studying a particular approach, we do start categorizing, especially in comparative politics. We start saying this is a rightist idea, this is a leftist idea, this is a liberal idea, this is a communist idea, this is a socialist idea. We can say directly in the question itself that it is a idea which can be from multiculturalism school of thought under the political science, and it was first of all given by Franz Bauss. Then as a react, it was given by, because there were classical, I'm only writing the keywords. These words are such words which you are supposed to underline in your answer when you put them in your answer, when you structurize your answer. Whatever I'm writing here are those terms which are supposed to be underlined in your answer, which fetch you the marks, which should catch, which you have to make sure that these should not be missed by the examiner. Fine. So there were classical evolutionists. स्टोरी है कि हुआ क्या था कि there was a time when we were evolutionists. So there was a time when we were not aware कि हमारा IVC था, इंडस्ट्रियल सिविलाइजेशन था, एंड व्हाइट मैन्स बर्डन और ये सारी जो थ्योरीज है ना, ये क्लासिकल एवोल्यूशनिस्ट से निकल के आती हैं. दोज गाइज यूज्ड टू थिंक दैट विक्टोरियन कल्चर is the superior culture, right? And then they say that every other civilization is inferior, they don't know how to conduct themselves, they are not gentle people, they are not civilized people, there's no concept of gentleman and lady, right? So they, from this very thinking, from the backdrop of this very thinking comes in the idea of saying someone that your culture is barbaric, because फिर तो आपको demean करना, you can use different adjectives. Then you will say we have white man's burden, we are supposed to civilize you, you are not capable of governing yourself, that's why we have to keep you as a colony, because you guys are never, your race is never capable of governing themselves, because you are not aware of your history. And then they will, easily impose theirs on yours. Then you came to know about IVC, and then you know the rest of the story कि उसके बाद Indians में confidence instill होता है from different perspectives. I'm just trying to relate, समझाने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ कि क्या story थी, ठीक है. तो classical evolutionists का उस टाइम पे बहुत ज्यादा आतंक चल रहा था, है ना. So Franz Bauss was like, listen, I am against you. So it was a reaction against classical evolutionists, the people who were very much of the view that Victorian culture, which is the culture of monarch Europe, right, the Great Britain Empire, that culture, it's Victorian culture. So Victorian culture, especially during the time of Queen Victoria I, the culture that developed, how society started working, how people started behaving with each other, how festivals and conducts were being done, how when a man meets a lady, how the conducts are, all these things form part of Victorian culture. Fine. So these people were suffering from, we can say, Western or European ethno comes from ethnic centricism. Fine. They were suffering from Western or European ethnocentrism. Ethnocentric means when you are focused on something, and ethno means your ethnicity. So ethnocentrism means you are focused on your ethnicity so much that you cannot see beyond, and you think this is superior, and you can also not accept something being beyond yours. Find all of these ideas. When you hear the word ethnocentrism, these are the kind of ideas they were holding at that point of time. And the whole political shift, the monopoly, the hegemony that you see currently from the West, it was even there at that time in people's mind, right? And they used to think everyone else has no brains, right? To be very frank, and keeping it simple for a generation of yours to understand. Fine. This is the ethnocentrism they were suffering from. Victorian culture's ethnocentrism. And if they were giving such an idea, someone will come and criticize. So they'll say, no, this is not the right way of thinking. Every culture has its own values, and if you cannot relate to it, you will think that whatever they are doing is wrong. If it does, because your value system is of course made out of your cultural practices, and if something does not go well with your value system, you will say this is wrong, immoral, inhuman, whatever you want to say. You will say that this is not good. And then you will start imposing, then you will start telling them also that how it is not good, what they should do instead of respecting the particular culture. Fine. Now, remember the time when Indian culture was considered very, very superstitious, and now when scientists started, exploring what has been written in Puranas, a lot of things have got scientific backings, or whatever was written in Vedas. On that note, Ayurveda especially, a lot of that has got scientific backing today. How it is getting scientific backing now? When you started to first of all accept that okay, this could be true. Every scientific experiment happens on a hypothesis that, and you assume that okay, this could be the outcome or this could not be the outcome. Here is something I am assuming, right? And then I experiment. So if you give it enough respect to consider it as your hypothesis first, that is certain amount of acceptability towards the culture. And how are you having scientific backing now while first you absolutely ignored it, denied it being facts and criticized Indians being superstitious? Right? So this was what? Ethnocentrism in you. And it's not a general population's fault also. The fault is that you are not open to, accepting that something else beyond yours could also be true. So this was something so a social change was required here. And then came in cultural relativism, that you need to give this space to other cultures to survive and thrive, instead of going around and telling people, no, you are doing it wrong, no, you are doing it wrong. How white people were doing during the colonial time? They were trying to do the same. They were trying to tell that you are not capable, you are absolutely wrong, you are superstitious, and this is how things are done. So they were trying to teach. Don't try to teach. Right? This is what cultural relativism came in from. Now, this is the very basic idea, simplest language I have used, right? And you could understand कि बात क्या करते हैं cultural relativism में. अब आते हैं scholarly aspects. ठीक है? Then cultural relativism actually leads to, now I can write a lot of line, it leads to appreciation of the culture around the world. All of this you can write for yourself, but for now, point is that you understood it. Fine. What cultural relativism is. Do the ornamentation in your answer the way you would like. You can, now you will wonder, what all scholars will I write? Okay, Franz Bauer I have. I've mentioned it, I have mentioned it in my answer. What all scholars I can mention apart from him? The multiculturalists. We can mention Bhikkhu Parekh. We can mention Wilhelm Lica. The pluralists we can mention. Right? Miller we can mention. Right? Okay. Now, you will criticize it also. Let me put across that viewpoint, and then we'll move to another question, next question. Because point is not how, I'm not going to dictate answers, I'm only going to have you have this understanding. Fine. So what will be the criticism? What if this cultural relativism was already existing and you were not criticizing other cultures? India will still be having sati pratha and child marriage. Right? If you were not criticizing it, a lot of cultures have human sacrifice, right, as part of worship, right, rituals, rites, right. So a lot of things, cultural relativism could be even criticized upon, right, because it would be, if also, let me take you to this another dimension which you can add. There are actually two aspects of cultural relativism also. Number one is absolute relativism, where you do not ask questions, you just try and know about that culture, giving it enough human respect that, okay, let me know about it. When you are willing, curious to know about it, that is also paying enough respect to something that exists. You go and see some monuments, what are you contributing towards it? Nothing. You are curious, you are going there, and that is enough respect that you consider it worth visiting. So if you consider it worth knowing, that is enough respect. So this is what absolutists will do. Just know about different culture, gain knowledge about it, because it is a different culture altogether, a different way of life, different than yours. You should be open to knowing it. This is what absolutists will do. They will not question, they will just know how it is that it works. Then there is a critical cultural relativism. These guys are going to ask questions that why it is done. Okay, it is done. Why? Do you know why you are leading this way of life? Culture is what? Way of life, right? If you want to start your answer from the introduction of culture, somebody would start it like I began my discussion from the definition of cultural relativism, because this is a 150 word answer. Why to go too far and then come back? Start from the point. It has to be crisp. Every line, every word that I'm spending from that, budget of 150 that I have, it should be worth it. So I started from the definition of cultural relativism. It is highly likely that a lot of people in the examination hall would want to start it from the definition of culture itself. They would say culture is a way of life and all of this, right? So while you have a way of life, somebody could question you why you are having certain way of life. If someone is having a rice dominated diet, if someone is having rice as staple food, a question could come by, then he will say, in my locality, in my, it is produced more, it is, the availability is there. So from the generations, we are dependent on rice as our staple food. If I'll go to North India and I'll say, why you are dependent so much on wheat? What they will say, availability. So there is a reason of why that they can answer it with. So criticals will ask those questions, and if whys are not good enough, then they will do what? Then they will try and tell them that this is the thing. So they will criticize. What critical is? When you are criticizing, you are looking at it, you are trying to know about it, and when something you find wrong with it, you also put it across that this is something wrong I found, and this is why I think this is wrong. This is how you criticize. So when I say critical, this is what they are going to do. The people who believe in critical cultural relativism. So there are two aspects of cultural relativism. Fine. Now let's talk about criticism. Remember, I told you just now that cultural relativism, when I began, I told you that human rights ka criticism, when we want to do, we talk about cultural relativism, and we say that, okay, how could you say that certain rights you have decided are universal in different cultures? Different values are there, right? And different rights get different sort of values, right? So why do you say it is universal? You have not, all of this is dependent on the first world countries' viewpoint. You have not paid attention to the third world. Okay, USSR or Russia was one such country which was, reasonably powerful at that time. So you have included some economic and socialist rights also in your human right, declaration. But have you paid attention towards the third world countries? Could be a question. That is a criticism to human rights. But then in the same form, if we know, and it is in our knowledge, we have, I am saying that हमने ये डायरेक्टली नहीं पढ़ा, पर मुझे पता है कि सब लोगों ने ह्यूमन राइट्स की क्रिटिसिज्म पे पढ़ा है. अब क्वेश्चन ह्यूमन राइट्स के पहले इस पे आ गया. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू हैव टू टैकल दिस क्वेश्चन, लेट्स से, देन is your mind able enough by the time of examination, is it trained enough to identify that human rights is also criticism of this particular approach? Contradictory है ना. So either you use it as human rights criticism, or you put across human rights point as a criticism to this one, that what if the fodder I've already told you, there are a lot of evils, social evils that run across societies, right? For example, even in West, they are still fighting for Black Lives Matter. George Floyd, recently it happened, right? Now there is a human right of everyone on their body. Abortion right is being curtailed in US, right? Joe versus Wade. It is happening. It's not like some evil was existing in Indian society only. Throughout the world, human right, if we start leaving it for the sake of cultural relativism, then how could you talk about human rights? So again, human rights will pose a criticism for cultural relativism, and we'll say that if we go by cultural relativism, absolutely, and then human rights can never be met, right? Or put it in your ornamental language, whenever it will be required, when we'll be studying it in class someday, we can cover it even further. But right now I really have to move towards next question, and I hope that आसान से आसान भाषा में it was pretty clear to you कि point क्या था examination में, है ना? So next question is revolution in permanence. Fairly tricky question. Again, I am telling you right now, UPSC is not going to ask beyond the syllabus it has given you, and I am also going to tell you that you have covered it. why this gets difficult is because you cannot relate at that time and you only have limited time. उस टाइम में अगर रिलेट नहीं कर पाए ना एक बार क्वेश्चन पे, तो वो भी इवन दैट फीलिंग ऑफ नॉट बीइंग एबल टू रिलेट बिल्ड्स अ लॉट ऑफ प्रेशर, and for next 2 minutes again because of that pressure you won't be able to relate, and this is something which increases the this is something which qualifies an examination to be called difficult. So with due regards to all those people you have come across who are telling that no paper was not difficult, it was just analytical, let's tell them that this is how we say that it was relatively difficult, because then it costs you a lot, right? So why do I say this analytical paper is getting difficult? Revolution in permanence is something that when we speak about revolution, you will think first of all about whom? About Marx. So baby steps towards the getting to know the answer. So if I have taken first baby step, I know that okay, Marx, around Marx I have to think. Fine. Then Marx is talking about revolution. We know it. And thereafter, if I start exploring, there is Mao Zedong. What he said? He said he was actually implying revolution in permanence's idea. He said that revolution has to go on. You have to keep putting across change in your society to keep yourself relevant to the society. So first of all, he had this communist revolution wherein he captured the mainland China and established his communist government, Red China, right? Then he came up with cultural revolution. So some or other aspect of revolution he did keep alive throughout. That is the idea of practical implication that we saw from Mao's story. We understand that okay, even practically revolution in permanence is a thing. It is for real. He then gave this idea of let 100 flowers bloom. Okay, let 100 flowers bloom is let's have different sort of opinions in our country. The idea, however, whenever you are a communist, you would not tolerate criticism, right? So idea was that if the 100 flowers are blooming, you would know who is against you, and then you will be able to eliminate it, because then only if you allow people to speak, you will know where to work to strengthen yourself and eliminate those elements which can be harmful for you. So even behind 100 flowers bloom, it was not like he was being liberal in allowing people to have their opinions and put across their opinions. He was only using this idea for the welfare or for strengthening, for establishment, proper establishment, for fixating the roots of communalism in China properly. But he gave this idea. He was in continuous permanent revolution throughout his life. Fine. So I'm not going to go after what is cultural revolution and all of that. This is the idea that Mao gave. And also, then who was someone who worked behind this theory? There was a scholar who is called father of neo-Marxism. Now, if you have not studied about it, you would say, probably you have not gone into the depth of your subject yet, but you will have to. So there is Trotsky. Lot of, look at the best of the analysis from best of the faculty. This name is not going to come. Why? Notes में नहीं है. नोट्स में नहीं है तो बोल नहीं सकते, क्योंकि फिर क्वेश्चन आएगा कि नोट्स में क्यों नहीं है ना? मतलब यहाँ पे दिस इज द फादर ऑफ नियो मार्क्सिज्म. नियो मार्क्सिज्म के फादर हैं ट्रॉट्स्की, एंड ही हैज टॉक्ड अबाउट दिस रेवोल्यूशन इन परमानेंस आइडिया. He said that So what Marx and Lenin used to say, that peasant class is not capable of revolution. There was a requirement of a proper capitalist society. First of all, for Marx, there was a requirement of capitalist society for the revolution to happen. Then we saw that Lenin defied him while he was putting Marxism in practice. Russia was not a purely capitalist society, right? And he put it there. He made Russia a communist society, and he said that I am a Marxist. He made sure to put across the point that he was doing is based on the ideas of Marx, and he was making sure that he put across the point that he was going to follow Marxism, right? But what he was defining was a proper capitalist society, right? Then Lenin said that peasants cannot be part of revolution. And next came Mao. Mao was the next after Lenin to be a proper Marxist in his ideas, and who was ready to apply it, right? But something has to be changed. See, there is one aspect of something being just a theory. Then to make it apply in the practical life, certain changes will definitely come. Theory और practical में difference होता है ना, तो अगर वहां से theory से practical पे जाएंगे तो changes आएंगे based on what all conditions you face. Theory is all that you are imagining would happen, then you are trying to face life based on your theory. Certain changes you will have to bring about when you are trying to apply it. Then Mao's requirement was that China was an agrarian society, just like India was, a lot of peasants. And Lenin is saying, also Mao is saying, peasants have no role in revolution. That class is not eligible for revolution. In fact, that class was not existing in the society they were talking about, so they would not know. Now this class is the most in China. Now Mao used peasantry, first of all, in the form of revolution, and this is what Trotsky says, that socialist revolution could occur in the societies that have not achieved advanced capitalism at all. We can see it from Lenin's and Mao's example both. Then Trotsky also argues that bourgeois in late developing societies or late developing capitalist societies are actually incapable of all the productive forces that we are seeing. Not everyone is having the control of resources and then they are ruling. Sometimes the control of resources is not there, even then they have been able to reach to the oligarchical capacity. So some models are being defined, and that's why we are saying he is neo-Marxist. He is in another generation, he is in another time than Marx was, and that's why he is revitalizing, reviving, right, making it more relevant to current society. So आज के time पे we can see that you own a lot of land and then you are a bourgeois. Just be owning a simple IT company and you are a bourgeois. Fine. So there is never going to be this sort of capitalism also in society. Marx was talking about that absolutely all the production sources are in the hands, because state is in between. Come on, in practical life, state is in between already. It is existing, and we are not going to start creating undo everywhere and start creating it from scratch, right? So industrial proletariats, while they were there was also a society where industries were not there. What about the third world? Are you trying to say, dear Marx, that third world countries are never going to be able to have this kind of revolution? No, That's what Trotsky theorized, that even peasants can be there. He did not say directly peasant. He said that it's not necessary that only industrial proletariats, because source of production, when we start speaking about production, we are talking about industries, right? And then he is like, it's not about industrial proletariats. Let's give space to the peasant class, to the agrarian societies. So he was theorizing it and he was applying it. That's why these two are very important names to talk about in your answer. Most of the people are going to talk about him only. Somebody who is going to talk about him is going to stand out and going to fetch more marks. This is the point. This is the whole point. So he is the theorist, like Marx was the theorist. Lenin applied it, right? Trotsky, let's say, again, he was inspired primarily from Marx. He was probably not even reading Trotsky, but we today can compare. We know about both of them, so we can say that he was the theorist and he was somebody who was applying it. So both we should talk about when we talk about revolution in permanence. It's not like अगर मार्क्स के बारे में सिर्फ बात करके आए तो आपका आंसर गलत है. गलत कैसे है? वो है. He is part of revolution in permanence. He was doing revolution in permanence. He was theorizing revolution in permanence. So if you add this to your answer, it's going to have more stars, right? Because also there is another way Trotsky saw revolution in permanence. He said, see, communism always want to expand. He said that so we were talking about Mao and Trotsky, right? So these guys were giving ideas on revolution in permanence. Trotsky would say that you are absolutely eliminating third world countries from your theory, and in neo, if I'm trying to revive Marxism, if I'm trying to study Marxism, I'm a Marxist scholar, my contribution would be to make it relevant with today's world, right? So if I am Trotsky, I will also say such things, that to make it relevant for today, there are different aspects in the world. There is a third world country scenario that's happening. Why would you eliminate it while the idea of communism is to expand itself? If you keep looking for capitalism, right, and you'll wait for the capitalism first to thrive, means an ideology that you want to oppose, first you'll let it thrive and you'll be sitting there and watching it on the TV. No, you'll start thinking about how I can expand to those countries, right? So you will accept the peasantry, and Mao did it. And can we also not say that it will be a counter to capitalism? It will prevent capitalist hegemony in the world, right? And that's how, if I have to keep expanding, even that would be an idea of revolution in permanence, because one after the other, I'll keep going towards different countries. I'll keep changing my ideas, my way of implying those ideas based on the country's position, right, based on the requirements within any XYZ country, and the revolution will be going on continuously, right? That is an idea, that is also an aspect or a perspective from which we can look at this term revolution in permanence. Okay? And even to keep it intact, you have to keep doing the revolution even in the same country, like Mao did in China. So the revolution in permanence is going on continuously, right? If you have to relate it, you can even relate it with the back to French Revolution, and you can say that even in French Revolution there was this idea that to keep the liberty intact, we have to keep things in check continuously, right? But that will be too far-fetched. It is not required. We can keep it till here. After all, we only have 150 words in our hands. So word economy also we have to keep in mind. Then we move to basis of power. Let's erase it all from here and start talking. Basis of power. First of all, you will be defining power in this question, because if you are going to talk about the basis, the sources of something, you should first of all tell what it is all about. So power is the ability or capacity of more powerful to influence the actions and behavior of less powerful in the desired manner. The simplest definition of power. Fine. So power, then we can put across a scholar also. We can, whatever scholar you want to say, let's say Frank Bailey, he says that power is a vital element of human survival and it has signs and manifestations. It will start showing up in the form of manifestations means it will start showing up in the form of every aspect of life for interpersonal relations. For example, if you and your father are there at home, he has power over you. Certain amount of power he enjoys. He can influence your actions and behavior based on the desired manner, right? So even in all sorts of other interpersonal relation, student teacher, management teacher, everyone's interaction is based on certain interpersonal relations. So it will show up, it will manifest in the interpersonal relations, right? Through economic transactions to, so we can say from economy to spiritual, everywhere it will be same with respect to power. If there is a spiritual guru you have got, then you will listen to what he says, and if you are listening to what he says, he has this power to influence your behavior, right? Then he is powerful, right? So power is going to show up in all interpersonal aspects, be it from economical to even spiritual and even political, right? And this simple definition is given by Frank Bailey, right? There is an E here and Y. Then power is, of course, we will go about in our answer. Power is associated with authority and all of these things. Let's get to the crux. What all we are going to understand. That power is, what are the sources of power? First of all, legitimacy is one source of power. If a government is having, support of the people, we can say it is a legitimate government. If it is going by the rule of law, we can say it is a legitimate government. And in this form, we can say if there is an organizational structure, right, which you have decided. Now organizational structure, institutional structure, one and the same thing. Organization / institution, whatever you want to think about it. I can categorize even government into this. I can categorize a private owned company into this, right? Government is also institution / organization, private company is also same. And there are going to be certain organizational structure. If a person, wherever he or she is placed in that organizational structure, is working according to that, this person holds legitimacy and certain power. So legitimacy is also source of power. That is the first basis of power. Then there is referent power. Referent power is all about the ability of an individual to attract others and then build their faithfulness around him, right? Dharma gurus jo hote hain, they have this power, right? Or Bollywood stars, they have this referent power. You will not realize that this person has got some power, but they are using it in their daily lives. They know they have got certain amount of power. They are powerful people in different manner than you would not imagine in your daily lives, right? And this could be because a person is, why will you get attracted towards a person to allow him have referent power? The person could be very influential, very charismatic, very much of fame, very popular personality. These are the characteristics, right? And then this person ends up getting powerful because of the referent source of power, that people are again and again referring to him, right? Okay, then of course there are, now you'll start feeling that the sources of power are getting narrower and narrower. Not necessarily the source has to be very wide, it's still a source of power, right? Next is reward as a source of power. Think about it. If you are able to give, if your teacher is taking your test and this teacher has this power to either punish you, see, punishment is also a reward, it's just a negative reward, fine, either to punish you or give you full marks. This makes this position of the teacher to decide which way to go about you, makes him or her powerful. Here, what is the source of power? Reward is the source of power, right? This person is having this authority that he or she can reward you in a certain way. It is the reward which is making this person powerful. If it was not for the reward, if we remove the reward from here, there is no power this person is then having in your life, right? अगर आपका मार्क्स टीचर आपको नहीं दे रहा, आपका टीचर आपको पनिश नहीं कर सकता, फिर क्या सोर्स ऑफ पावर, right? So reward is also a source of power. We got it. Then there is coercive power. There is force in the power, right? If a very lean and thin man has indulged into a fight with a bodybuilder kind of man, very muscle and all, right, muscular. Now this person has certain amount of physical powerful attributes than the leaner one. On the behavior of leaner one, this person can have coercive influence. So coercion, the mere possibility of this muscular man beating the lean man blue and black is having a coercion, a deterrence in on the behavior of the leaner one, right? He'll make sure that his eyes, both of them, are fine by the end of the interaction they are having, right? So this is also a source of power. Even here, punishment could be one such thing. Again, if there is an argument and the other person is powerful than you, he can punish you, right? That punishment is coercion on your behavior. Here, coercion, the ability to forcefully, right, the same force which you do not enjoy, if that is being enjoyed by someone else, that's coercion. If coercion is removed, there is no power. So coercion becomes a source of power. Of course, this will seem like, oh, we started from legitimacy and it was all about government. It is getting narrower, right? But it is still source of power. We can see it is source of power because if we remove it, the power goes, right? So it is also a basis of power. Then, as per all of these aspects, you can start relating. I can name all of them. For example, expertise, knowledge, right? Information, all sorts of power that you have covered. So from legitimate, referent to expert, if you have expertise of something, if you're a scientist, you have a lot of expertise in, let's say, chemistry, you can start creating certain formulas for yourself and you can use it to make people sick. You can create a biological weapon if you are a biotechnician, right? If you can do one such thing, you are powerful in yourself, right? And if you have a lot of information, again you become powerful, right? For example, if there is a raw agent, right, he is very powerful, very influential, government will listen to him and will take care of his well-being, because if government doesn't do so, he has a lot of information and that information gives him a source of power for himself, which makes sure that government takes care of him. Even if he retires, beyond that he will be taken care of, right? So there is information also working as a source of power. Next question is fairly simple. Next question is Locke's social contract. So I was saying that it's not everything that may seem absolutely absurd in the examination. Some questions are fairly simple. System approach, I believe, was fairly simple, and so is Locke's social contract, as it is every political science student has, covered it and would know what to present over here. And number of times you must have also practiced. So some questions are like UPSC is willing to give you marks, and some questions are like UPSC is adamant on not giving them to you. Fine. So John Locke's social contract theory, from where you will start? You will start from either talking about Locke himself, you will give some background, right? Or you can, since you have this economy of word thing in your mind, so if I would be at your place, I would start telling how John Locke was interpreting instead of going personal about it. Right? So I might say that according to his social contract theory, individual is supposed to, I'll go very specific. In the introduction itself, I'll write one such thing, that examiner ko it gets conveyed that there is some difference between Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. I'll make sure that examiner from the introduction itself gets interested in my answer. That is the task of my introduction, that telling the examiner that this person is coming from a place of knowledge in the subject, and I must read the answer, because if I am able to convince him to read the answer further, it is very difficult. They'll just see keywords, the underlined ones, and they'll give you marks. Let's be very frank. They have to go through the same answer copies, right? So if I am able to glue and create interest, even if he is very honest examiner and he has decided for himself that I'll read all the answers of everyone's copy that I'm checking, because after all I'm trying to help the UPSC in selection of civil services candidate, even then, if this answer he finds more interesting than other ones, then he'll give me more marks, right? So also look at the question. UPSC has specially mentioned that tell me about Locke's social contract theory, and even the examiner, the checker, the UPSC, everyone knows that there are 3 people associated with this theory. So if I tell them that you have asked Locke specifically, and I tell you what is specific about Locke in the introduction itself, which makes him different from the other 2, right? That amounts to a basically impressive introduction, which comes in from a lot of practice, because examination may you will get more generic towards your approach. You will be running out of time and all of these things, right? So practice. Then I'll say, according to Locke, there is a social contract theory where individual surrenders. What makes him different is where individual is surrendering only the rights to interpret the law, only the right to interpret the law of nature for themselves to the sovereign, to the state, right? So what right he is actually giving up? Individual. Locke says there was a state of nature and there were some laws which were working in the state of nature, laws of nature. Now I am giving up. So in the state of nature, I want to create a society. I am trying to build up a social contract. In the state of nature, I was interpreting these rights for myself. In the state of nature, if I was free, I was determining these rights for myself. John Locke says that you are giving up your right to interpret the law of nature for yourself. Somebody else will be there, some other organization will be there, state will be there, society will be there. Society is going to determine for you what will be the interpretations of laws of nature. Fine. This is what Locke has said actually, that makes him different, that we are giving up our freedom and all of this. Locke says we are giving up first of all the right to, this is the exact thing Locke has said, that my individual in the state of nature trying to build up a society through social contract is ready to give up the right of interpreting the laws of nature for himself, right? So that what could be executed? The society's formation could be executed. And if anyone violates these interpretations that the society is going to make, the society has to make sure that there is punishment for the violator. Punishment for the violator. And Locke says the rest of the rights, they remain intact. Now you will think, what remains intact if I am not knowing what my rights are beyond the fact that I was there to determine my own rights in the state of nature? All the laws I was determining. Now you are making laws. I will eventually come to know what all are my rights. No, rights like my life, my property, all of these are going to remain intact, and now you make laws for me. Fine. This is the idea of John Locke's social contract to create a civil society. He says, quote unquote, John Locke himself, that I easily grant that civil government in the proper remedy for inconvenience of state of nature. Because there was, why was somebody willing to do social contract? Because in the state of nature, some inconvenience he was facing, right? Then he said, okay, let's create a civil society. So in the state of nature, there are some inconveniences, and for getting remedy for those inconveniences, but I desire those who make this objection to remember that absolute monarchs are all bad men. Fine. And the government is to be the remedy for those evils which necessarily follow man's being judged in their own cases, right? So if in the state of nature I was determining what my laws are going to be, everyone's laws are different, and Locke is not saying my superior one, the monarch, is absolutely good. He is saying they are all bad men. Because in the state of nature, if my value system is different from your value system, I'll say you are wrong. Then you are bad. Right? So if there is no system in place, all bad men, whosoever is trying to rule. Right? So the government, if there will be a government in place properly, that government, that institution will make sure that they are deterred, they are kept check upon, all the bad men who do not coincide with my viewpoint, because now that civil society organization is, or the government is going to determine laws for all of them. Fine. And I desire to know what kind of government that is and how much better it is than the state of nature. And eventually the remedy that will be presented to me, so he is keeping all the rights intact, right? Apart from this, he'll see how the remedy is, how it is working, and he will start modifying also if he is not satisfied. Although the sentence leaves it over here by law, but if we read between the lines, he is allowing the individual to determine whether he likes the government or not. And if he is able to determine whether he likes it or not, that right is intact. He is not saying that once the government has told you, you have to do it. Right? All other rights are intact. Then you will do what? You will start modifying the institution also. Right? Therefore, Locke is not vesting, or Locke is not vesting all the powers in the hands of individual, rather than he is giving it to the entire society. Right? He is saying monarchs are bad men. So single person he is not investing in. He is investing in society. Because he is saying government, from wherein the also the government which has to make sure that no monarch performs something bad on me, right? So the society he is investing. And now when I talk about individual, I am individual, you are individual. So if all the individuals are determining, together the society is determined, right? Under the social contract. So this is Locke's social contract. It is based on the consent of the people, all of that, you know, all of them are coming together in under the wheel of ignorance, and you know the whole story thereafter. Then who is saying what? So we have to include scholar. So Sabine, according to Sabine, Locke assumes that there are two contracts between society, between individuals, which is giving rise to the community, and other between the community and this government. This is the opinion of Sabine, that Locke is telling us about social contract. But it seems like कि Locke के दिमाग में ना there are two contracts happening. One is between individual and community, and the other is between community and government, right? Now, if you keep thinking about it, you will also be able to convince yourself कि हाँ Sabine सही कह रहा है. But this is just an opinion. We'll keep it like this. We have to put it across because हमें और scholars के views रखने हैं 360 degree coverage के लिए आंसर, ठीक है? And I am also not going to go into that story right now, ठीक है? Then, secondly, Locke is also suggesting that minority must accept the judgment over here of the community as a whole, because if someone is determining in the state of nature, one government, laws of nature are determined by a government which will eventually be created out of the community, and if someone violates, then he'll be punished also. Then won't it be like someone who's differing from your idea and doing something of his own will be punished? So this is getting majoritarian. This is a criticism of John Locke's theory of social justice, social contract, sorry, right? Because think of, are you able to understand? See, if Locke is saying that I am going to just, how much time have we spent already? Lot of time. So if Locke is saying that my idea is individual is leaving their right, and they'll come to this social contract and they'll be like, okay fine, I'm going to give up my rights, you determine what will be the law under the state of nature, fine. And then if you are determining what will be the rights under the state of nature, you are also going to determine about the government and all of these things. The whole community together is determining, and I am investing in that government, that okay, let the government determine. From where that government is rising? From the community itself. And in that community, if I am then there to violate those things, those laws which you have created, I am getting punished. While this means that majority of people who agreed to this, and I will only violate when I disagree. So if I am disagreeing, I am the minority, right? Then this is majoritarian. You are punishing me, right? So this is a criticism. Again, what will happen if you want to take this criticism further? You will ask, what will happen if John Locke gets, the majority gets tyrannical? Tyranny is something that can happen. Minority rights can be suffering. This is happening, let's say in China with you Uyghur Muslims, right? Majority getting tyrannical. They want to impose their culture everywhere. If a mosque was like this in China, the architecture has been changed to this, right? Now you can keep relating it with other aspects. I have just given you an information, right? Our next question is, factors like community, culture and nation has weakened the hegemony of neoliberalism, right? This was our next question. This is where the second question starts, and now fairly walkable through part begins. First part, lot of concept, right? And now we just have to understand the idea which is being put across. So they are saying how neoliberalism, if I could put it in this way, how neoliberalism is being countered by community, culture, nation, right? Can I write it like this? Community, culture, then nation, indirect proportion, right? So if this gets strengthened, this gets weakened. Fine. So now Robert Nozick, Michael Sandel, Michael Walzer were of the view that individual is not situated self and it cannot be determined by the neoliberal ideas. It is not just about individual. Neoliberalism, in fact, as an ideology, focuses more on the individual, right? And individual, however, is not a situated self. These guys are of the view that it is dependent on its community for determining a lot of things. It is dependent on its culture, its nation for determining a lot of things. Now, in this case, if you are trying to put across certain viewpoints of free market economy and you want him to keep free from these, it is not possible. This value riddenness is not possible. The priority is always going to be in these propositions whenever it is required from the individual. He will not say, okay, I want free market. He will say, I want my nation's dignity. He'll fight for it. He'll fight from his own government for his community. For his cultural preservation, he'll fight. For example, we talk about Western culture being imposed on us, right, from around the world. We start putting in place the promotional things with regards to the Indian culture or Asian culture, right? And we can see that this phenomena is rising today, which is why this question has been asked. We can see deglobalization's aspect. Now, if this word is new for you, please know that why it is relevant from here. You can put in your answer. Remember, a question came from UPSC side itself that neoliberalism is the political ideology behind globalization, right? So, globalization gets inspired from neoliberalism. So, I can say that it is a manifestation of neoliberalism in the real world scenario. So, there is globalization happening. It is a synthesis of neoliberal ideas and market economy, and then came in as a manifestation of globalization institutions like WTO, right? Now even WTO gets weakened because WTO wanted to achieve free trade across the world, right? Even now there are import duties, export duties, all of these things are in place. Various forms of trade restrictions are in place from various countries, be it quality control or anything, right? Then WTO gets countered because national interest is there. Why any country will control it? Because their national economic aspects are under consideration by the government. So nation becomes a priority. If nation is becoming a priority, WTO is suffering, which means globalization is suffering, which means neoliberalism is suffering. Globalization and WTO eventually is the manifestation, real life manifestation. As I told you, there is a difference between theory and practical. So this is practical, this is theory, right? We speak about school of thought, then we apply it and certain institutions are created. Now, there is always a phenomena of, first of all, there comes in a thesis. There comes in a thesis. Then certain viewpoints enter and interact with this thesis and it becomes synthesis. Let's say neoliberalism was our thesis. Globalization is a synthesis in practice, put in practice. Then there is antithesis, which follows a thesis, which follows synthesis. So there is antithesis which follows synthesis. Now, this is how all the phenomena in the world work. First of all, एक बात कही जाएगी, फिर उसमें लोग अपने ओपिनियन जोड़ेंगे, वो बात थोड़ी सी मॉडिफाई हो जाएगी, फिर उसके बाद कुछ लोग आएंगे जो उस बात से एग्री नहीं करेंगे, वो उसको काउंटर करेंगे. दैट इज एंटीथेसिस. ये हर एक फिनोमिना जो हमारी सोसाइटी में वर्क करता है उसके लिए ट्रू रहेगा. दिस इज अ हायरार्की हाउ इट फॉलोज. Thesis, synthesis and antithesis. So after what is the antithesis to globalization? It is called deglobalization. A lot of it you must not have heard, but have you heard the term protectionism? You have heard it, right? So under protectionism, it's the same thing which is deglobalization, which we call deglobalization, right? So people going anti-globalization, people starting to prefer their own country goods and they are not preferring goods from outside. If we want to boycott Chinese goods, if we want, so India was following what before LPG? Protectionism, right? So that was, and then it opened up to globalization. And now Modi ji says let's become self-sufficient, let's go Atmanirbhar, but he also has to give a disclaimer that we are not following protectionism. Why he is giving this disclaimer? Because he knows that the policy that I am announcing will give this message to the world and the country that this is protectionism, which means protectionism is the real thing that exists, and this is how it exists, that you start thriving or emphasizing on your own things and you start rejecting the outside world. That is protectionism, right? And if Modi ji has to tell you that this is not protectionism, we are still going to interact with the outside world, we are still going to welcome them, we are still going to manufacture for them, right? If Modi ji has to tell you, then there must be some underlying smell of or fragrance of protectionism that's coming in from the policy. That's why he has to clarify. In every policy he is not clarifying, right, that this is not protectionism. In Atmanirbhar Bharat he did clarify it. So which means this has some underlying impacts or influences from protectionism. That is deglobalization. So why this question is being asked by UPSC? That this should also be a question. See, this question is being asked by UPSC because after the pandemic, in the pre-pandemic world, how the world was interacting, everyone was everywhere, right? Every good was available everywhere. But then in the post-pandemic world, scenario has changed. People came to know the vulnerabilities of supply chain. People came to know the vulnerability they put themselves into when they start interacting throughout the world. And that is when Brexit happened. So Brexit is also an example of this neoliberalism idea of the whole world market being connected together and having this interaction of laissez-faire with minimal state and all of these things, right? All of this is part of our neoliberal ideology being countered by our interest invested into our community, our culture and our nation, right? So various examples you have and scholars you have to put in your answer. Then now let's talk about the next question. So the next question is, equality of estates cause equality of power, equality of estates, equality of estates cause equality of power, and equality of power is liberty. Here estates are property. this point of view is also again very much related to Marx. At first instance, you start relating it to Marx because property signifies what? Economy, right? Property signifies economy, and if you are trying to relate it with Marx, then you will say, and it is telling you that equality of estates will mean equality of power, and if power is equal with everyone, it is ultimately going to lead to liberty. If you look at this aspect, you will know that I have to go beyond Marx. But we can touch upon Marx when we speak about, or when we write an answer about this aspect. So we will say that yes, Marx has told us that economy is the base and everything else is a superstructure. So in that case, while everything else is a superstructure, it can be said that based on economy, power can be determined, and if the economy that we are relating with estates over here, if that is equal, yes, we can say that equality of estates would mean equality of power, right? Because economy is the base, right? It is determining everything else. If it is equal, it is going to determine, let's say, power is the superstructure here, and estate is the base here. Then estate is going to determine power, economy is going to determine power. This statement stands true for us. Then what about the liberal aspect, the liberty aspect? Marx will not talk about the liberty, right? Will he? He will not. Then we have to enter here with John Locke. Even he gave his individual that all of your other rights are intact. You can keep property, I've already talked about it, right? You can have your life, you can determine things accordingly. If there is a danger to your life, you will behave differently and all of these things, right? Now, in case of property, if everyone is having it equally, then everyone is having similar power. If they are enjoying similar level of power, then they are enjoying similar level of freedom also. They are enjoying similar level of determination also, self-determination also, right? And that is all about liberty, right? So John Locke will enter and he will say, because he said that all other rights are intact, so he will say right to property is absolute. Right to property is absolute because all other rights cannot be taken away. Only the right to determine or interpret the law of the nature can be taken away. If all other rights cannot be taken away, means these are absolute rights of the individual. So he will say right to property is absolute. If right to property is absolute, each and every individual is having the right to have property. If everyone is to have property, property will be required to be distributed equally, and if it is going to be distributed equally, it will lead to equal amount of power and ultimately equal amount of liberty, right? So we have considered two different viewpoints, starkly different viewpoints, opposite viewpoints. We have looked at it from two ideologies. We have talked about two scholars here, and this is how you will go about this answer. And in fact, you can also include here Isaiah Berlin. This scholar will say that the value we put into something is incommensurable, right? And if the society is putting value into economy, into property, then it is of course going to determine the value of your individual power capacity, right? And but we can say that this individual and power capacity is not going to follow a strict hierarchy. So if there is a difference, see, value you are putting, your society is telling you that this thing is valuable. But if it's not equally distributed, on the contrary, it will lead to lack of power, and it will lead to, then if you are lacking power, you cannot really determine all that you want to do. You are not absolutely free. Fine. So you are not absolutely liberalized, and hence again the statements stand to even from the opposite perspective. That if first of all we were talking about if this is there, then this is going to be there and this is going to be there. Now we are from Berlin's perspective, we see it from the point that if this is not there, then this is not there, and then this is not there, right? From both the perspectives, you can prove that this statement is absolutely correct. Basically, you are supporting this statement from various angles, and you are telling UPSC that yes, this is fine, right? And then comes in your elitist theory of democracy. We are going to quickly talk about it. See, elitist theory, you may not have, now you'll think from where this is covered. I have covered my whole syllabus. The elitist theory of democracy was never there. There was elitist theory of power, right? So elitist theory actually remains the same whether it's with respect to the power or democracy. Point of elitist theory is that you are going to say it's the elites who are ultimately going to enjoy power, and here it is being written that it does not let people rule, right? The actual question is elitist theory of democracy denies possibility of democracy that as a rule of the people. Fine, this is the question. Now, elitist theory of democracy, first of all, you have to tell the examiner what it is. So, it says that it is the elites which actually ultimately rule in the society, and elitist theory, the proponents of elitist theory, the scholars who have given this theory, they'll support it, right? They'll just not say how it is doing it or what it is what it is that is happening. They'll not just say that elitist theory is happening, elites are ruling. They'll also tell why it is right for the elites to rule. So they'll say that people in general are not capable to hold power, right? So they will not be able to, and it is the elites who are capable, who ultimately get elected and by the support of people. So they are giving some regard to the people also. That is the role of people in the elitist theory, that they will, theory of democracy first of all, because it is elitist theory of democracy, and if we are talking about democracy, some role of people will be there. So as far as elitist theory of democracy is concerned, they are only going to say that people are given right to vote, and with that right to vote, they'll ultimately vote for a person that is going to hold power. Fine. So this is the role of people. This is where democracy comes in to elitism, and this is how you are going to determine. So they'll say why elites will come, because they are the capable ones ultimately. Now think about it. For someone who is charismatic, who is having money, right? In reality, only those people are going to actually be the candidate for elections, and ultimately one of them out of the competition, with elite competition, one of them is going to be elected. This is going to happen, right? Elitist theory of democracy mein, this is the phenomena which is going to follow. And we can also support this theory by stating that in India, when newly democracy was being established in a newly free country, Jawaharlal Nehru, who was an elite, got elected as the Prime Minister of India. It was because of the will of elites. So elitist theory also says that it is because of elites and their will that democracy itself is preserved. If elites are not there, democracy may not exist, because people in general are incapable. And if elites will lie towards somewhere else, they'll influence people into that direction. So because it is credited to him that because he was willing to he was a democratic, right? He wanted to have democracy in India. That's why the foundations of democracy in India got so strong. It was credited to him, and he was who? An elite. So it is the elite who is willingly making sure that democracy exists. That is also a point under the elitist theory of democracy. Fine. Then India's example we have given. So we have also put across an example, and we are saying this is how it could be said that it's not actually a rule of the people, right? And it is the elite who is, we can write words like who is the protector of democracy, and all of this will form part of your elitist theory of democracy. Fine. And thereafter, there is a person called Macpherson who criticized elitist theory of democracy. They say the criticism is that the theory is ignoring the substantive aspect, and it is just focusing on the fact of procedural aspect, that there is some procedure through which elites somehow go towards the top, right? What if a procedure, the procedure is changed, right? What if it is the elites are denied from contesting elections? What happens thereafter? Will the democracy not survive? According to elitists, it will not survive, but it is not true. We can give recent example of Aam Aadmi Party candidates in Punjab. From the ground, they picked the candidates, and these candidates actually won the elections. Now this defies the elitist theory of democracy. From India, if you are giving Jawaharlal Nehru's example, from India only you give example to criticize. It will be a great 360-degree coverage for the answer, right? However, for further criticism, we can say that VIP culture is something which comes into place because of elitist theory itself, because of this elitism in the society itself. We saw examples of party in power and the members of that party recently getting involved in certain controversies because of this VIP culture, right? Nishikant Dubey, Manoj Tiwari, right? All of these people, what all they did, it was because of this VIP culture and elitism in the society. So this is not good for democracy. We will ultimately, if we have to criticize, we will say elitism in itself is not good for democracy, right? And it certainly hampers the rule of law or the rule of people in the society. Now, next is liberal theory of state. So if you are trying to put across, this is very static, very much covered by all of the aspirants who are appearing for the mains examination, right? But the twist is, they have not just asked liberal theory of state, they are also writing towards the end in the contemporary politics. Contemporary politics. This is the word which makes all the difference. You just don't go and start vomiting out whatever you have read towards the or about the liberal theory of state. Of course, first you will be telling the examiner what state is if you want to, right? Or you can just, and then you will be determining from where you start counting that the contemporary politics has begun. Can we say after World War II? Somebody could say after World War II, because then during 1950s, he'll be having many scholars to quote, like Isaiah Berlin, Hayek, Nozick. I've already mentioned them while discussing neoliberalism, right? Milton Friedman, all of these scholars, you can, Margaret Thatcher, so many to quote. If you start from World War II and you go towards contemporary politics, right? So begin there and then come to the real phenomena of and of Cold War. Cold War is one such phenomena where we end our modern history after the end of Cold War. This is where our modern world history gets more or less concluded. After that, we are in contemporary period. It's still going on, right? After Cold War, we are in contemporary period. So that's where contemporary politics, where does your liberal state stands in this scenario, is where you have to go towards, right? So in this scenario, what all events have happened? 2008 financial crisis has happened, right? In 2011, Eurozone crisis has happened, right? Apart from that, in the year 2001, in 2000 or 2001, when did 9/11 happen? In 2001. So in 2001, 9/11 happened. That told you. So liberalists will say what? Minimalist state, all of these things, just a night watchman state they would want, right? So minimum state, that's the idea, right? But 9/11 told you that state needs to be there, because the neoliberals, they were saying that this welfarist state, neoliberalism was the latest one, right? In the hierarchy of, or in the process how liberalism was working, there was classical, then there was liberalism, or where the concept of welfare state emerged after classical liberalism. Then came in neoliberalism, and during neoliberalism, it was said that this welfarist state which was working, it was criticized for being a nanny state. All these detrimental terminologies were being used. But then, even after the thriving of neoliberalism, came in the 9/11, where it was noticed that state was needed for security aspects. In 2008, it was the state which bailed out lot of banks and financial institutions, lot of big companies, right? Otherwise, they would have vanished from the scenario, and the people would be in crisis, financial crisis for a long time. So this recession, financial crisis, it was the state's role which saved the lives, right? And in 2011 Eurozone crisis, similar thing was happening, right? So it was state whose role was re-emphasized. In contemporary politics, it has been determined that state is playing a very crucial role. So if you talk about liberal theory of state in contemporary politics, your answer must go in a direction of criticism of the latest one, the neoliberal ideas. And you said this, they were, first of all, you start with, they were saying this, they were saying that, these neoliberal people, who all thinkers I have mentioned before, they were wanting a minimalist state, they were calling the welfareism as nanny state, right? Because if someone is not having something, the state is ready to provide for it, then it is a nanny state, right? So, and what all they were saying, it is a necessary evil that we have to keep up with. But then these events happen when the state gets minimalistic, and the reinforcement of state's role, the necessity of state gets reinforced over here. And today, even you can quote the latest examples from pandemic itself, that it was because of the state's active role that the lives could be saved. Even in the most liberal of the country, DBT was being provided, direct benefit transfer was being provided for supporting the citizens, right? Even in US, the most liberal of the state, right? They were providing financial support to their citizens. So state's role was there in their lives to be saved. Fine. So it is, we have to, if we are quoting so many thinkers who are on the liberal side, we also have to quote Sabine here. Sabine has given a lot of functions for the state that the state has to perform. You can enlist those functions and tell that Sabine has rightly noted that the state has to perform certain functions. You can note it down in one paragraph, and you can say that towards the conclusion, you will be saying that it is being determined that for the welfare of the individual, the role of state is very critical, right? Although the current world scenario is the neoliberal one. And can you over here connect that I keep quoting that I've already talked about it. So the whole paper was woven based on the aspects of the questions, right? We can, with the small amount of information, I can use it everywhere repeatedly, right? And I am, even while discussing, I am saying already John Locke हो गया, उसको यहाँ quote कर सकते हैं. So lot of information. The question paper was very much interrelated and interdependent, right? So if your basics were clear with regards to certain principles, with regards to certain portions of the exam or the PSIR subject, then definitely it was going to be easier a deal, right? So definitely it was being criticized, and then a new aspect of state has to come all together. It was being called social liberalism. This is the new phenomena. See, for any ideology to survive, it has to keep making it more relevant, right? Modifications have to happen. First there was classical liberalism, then there was liberalism, neoliberalism, or at that time after classical liberalism we also call it modernism, right? Then there came in neoliberalism. Now what's developing is that you actually identify the role of state. You make sure that state's role is intact and it is playing it. You let it do social welfare. That is social liberalism, right? Now it's socialism that liberalism is trying to embrace so that it does not lose its feet from the changing world scenario, because it was determined with certain events that absolute neoliberal ideas were not going to work. Fine. Then comes in the question of human rights, and the question is, human rights are complex and contested social practices that organize the relations between individual, society and state. Now when they say contested, it means that there is certain amount of difference of opinion that is happening, right? Certain amount of difference of opinion that is happening. And if they write complex, it's the word that tells us that phenomena is not as simple. So first of all, we can start with UN's definition of human rights. That's where we start. It is a question on human rights. Then what we will do is, we will talk about why this human rights was there, given by UN. So why it was given? The Jews faced a lot of atrocities during World War II and even before that at the hands of Hitler. So it was determined and identified that human rights have to be protected. And it was then that certain human rights principles were enlisted and it became a human rights charter altogether by the UN, Human Rights Declaration, right? So we can we see over here that it is from the West that the whole concept is coming, whether it be the history to the concept. Then if you look at the human rights that are there enlisted in the declaration, even those, and then the way they want to implement it throughout, even that is a very Western idea. Again, lot of cultural relativism is missing, because in Asia, so Asian critique is the critique for human rights. So Asian values are different. In fact, within Asia, the values are so different. These Western people, they would want full determination for their society, but in Asia, families are a very crucial system, right? And then even beyond that, within Asia, there are different cultures. In West Asia, there is what's going on in Iran. They want women. The women are protesting for getting rid of hijab in Iran today. And in India, what's happening with regards to hijab? One side is saying wear hijab, one side is saying don't wear hijab. So a lot of treatment to the specific gender is different. The aspects are different. Now this is related to a religion, and this is not harming anyone's life or dignity. Now why will you question it, and how will you raise a question of human rights over here? But you did so because this is not same in your culture, and it was not so in your culture. That's why it was not acceptable to you, because according to your way of life, you thought that whatever your way of life was telling you was right, and you were not accommodative of the other culture, right? A lot of women in fact want to willingly wear hijab, but you will say that, oh, this government is being a very fundamentalist, right? So Asian values were missing with regard to human rights. This is the critique. This tells you how it is complex and contested. Contested because not all the world agrees with it, while you say it has to be universal, right? So when the question's tail ender is comment. So when you comment on something, you need to tell the examiner about the widest view that you can put across, right? Examiner is asking you, you have to tell what all you know about it. So you will go from criticism to favor, right? We have already discussed the good part of human rights when I was saying things regarding cultural relativism, that a lot of things human rights will determine. For example, if we are not questioning the other people's values, a lot of social evils will still be there, right? So you can do that. And of course, scholars are going to be Aya Berlin, again questioning the universalistic nature of human rights, right? And more of them. Then let's talk about individualism, which is inherent in Hobbes' theory. So Hobbes is considered absolutist, and that is the question also. The question is, individualism is inherent in Hobbes' absolutist theory. Comment. Why we are calling Hobbes absolutist? Because in his sovereign, in his monarch, he has, vested all the powers. That's why he became, the absolute power was lending into the hands of sovereign, Hobbes monarch, Leviathan, right? So that's why it was believed after reading Hobbes' theory how absolutist this person is. One single person is determining everything, right? But what is missing in saying so regarding Hobbes is that he has stated about the responsibilities that this sovereign will have to fulfill. Right? And then he has also stated about that you have to, even the sovereign has to follow the rule of law. Fine. He has instructed his sovereign to remain under the rule of law, and he has also told the individual that if your basic rights, if your life is under threat, you can revolt, right? He's saying that you can raise your voice, you can go against the state if your rights, if your life is threatened, if your rights are not protected, then you can go against him. He has given this right to his individual. So throughout he was only trying to actually determine it for the individual that his rights were protected. But because he was talking, so it is like if you give this much space to certain thing in your theory and this much space to another thing, your theory eventually will be considered all about this because of the space you have missed out on giving this. It's the way of writing. His determinations were about individual, but he wrote more about the Leviathan and what he has to do ultimately after individual has surrendered his rights. So that's why it was a criticism that was put across, but it is not so the case, and that's why this question has come up. It is for you to prove to the examiner that he was actually a great individualist, to be very true. Fine. And there is no doubt in that, and we can thereafter tell that how he has said that if your life is endangered, you can flee away, you can revolt against your state. And he has also told the Leviathan that you are to protect the life and liberty of the individual, the property of the individual. All of these laws you have to make, which make sure that individuals' rights are protected, and you have to follow the due process of law, rule of law you have to follow. Then in this case, if the sovereign is asked to follow law, this is also a limitation on the power of sovereign that Hobbes has made sure to put in his theory. And if it is there that he is clearly putting limitations on the power of sovereign, who he is protecting and from whom? Individual he is protecting from his sovereign, right? Then next question is about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. His idea of justice, which is egalitarian, against the Rawls idea of justice, where he considers justice as fairness and talks about pure procedural justice, right? So the question is, Dr. Ambedkar's idea of social justice leads to egalitarian justice as compared to Rawls justice as fairness, which aims at notion of pure procedural justice. Comment. So first of all, we'll start our answer from defining what is justice. Then let me tell you what is the exact crux that you have to put across in this answer, because you would know the Rawls theory of justice and you will tell the examiner, of course you are going to tell that हम दो लोगों के बारे में बात करें, उन्होंने बोला क्या exactly, फिर हम आएंगे कि कन्वर्ज कहाँ होते हैं. तो मैं आपको सीधा कन्वर्ज पे लेके जाती हूँ, because you guys know what Ambedkar is standing for and what Rawls is standing for. Rawls gave primacy to the procedural justice because he thought that at least if I am able to establish a procedure that somebody is following for reaching the justice, it could be determined, no matter what the outcome is, at least it could be determined that people can expect justice from that outcome. If XYZ procedure is followed, different procedure is followed each time, that is no justice. So if some procedure is there, if for the same crime, the same punishment is being given to everyone, that's a procedure. But if if you are saying I am going to punish, he has done crime, I am going to punish, but there is no procedure in place. Today I am very happy, so I'll give this punishment, and when I'll be angry, I'll give that punishment. That will be no justice. So that's why Rawls was all about procedural justice. He did determine procedures for reaching to the justice, wherein he talks about the starting from the wheel of ignorance he comes in, right? So he makes the social contract theory the basis of his theory of justice. This is true for Rawls. What Ambedkar has, why this question is asked? Because we generally forget or skip out, and UPSC found this gap in the convergence, that we skip out on Ambedkar being a critic of Rawls, right? How? Because he says that what was the cause of concern for Ambedkar? It was the class divide in the society. It was the class divide in the society, the caste discrimination in the society, that was creating a problem for Ambedkar, that he knew that if this exists, there could be no economic or political justice until social justice is there, right? So that was the concern of Ambedkar. We can also see it in our preamble, in the constitutional principles other than preamble as well. So Ambedkar was like, if you are under the wheel of ignorance in the original position, then you will not know what society has to offer to you, what all evils you will have to fight against, what all things are there for which you have to provide justice. If you know nothing, then you think everything is fine, and it is from there that you start, but everything is not fine, right? So he was against the wheel of ignorance aspect in the Rawls theory. First of all, this was a critique, right? This is the contradiction. Ambedkar has said there is no wheel of ignorance that we are going to follow, because for him, first of all, you need to know what the problem is, and the problem you have to fight against, that procedure you have to determine. Fine. So that's why Ambedkar wanted to have an egalitarian form of justice, wherein each and every person gets equal respect, equal opportunity for real, not just for the namesake. Because if class discrimination is eliminated, the very basic thing that used to happen is they were going to determine your economic stature with respect to your caste. And if that is eliminated, caste discrimination is eliminated, the social justice that Ambedkar was standing up for was established, then the society will be egalitarian. So ultimately, egalitarian justice is something Ambedkar wanted to achieve for the society. So this is why these two scholars are put together in a question. This is the idea why UPSC is asking, because the wheel of ignorance in the Rawls theory could not be stood by Ambedkar. And then you can go about this question, that how you can also say that Rawls actually supported pure procedural, because all these keywords are there. Pure procedural justice is a keyword in your question. You will say, I just told you why Rawls was all about pure procedural justice, because he was saying that at least that assurance of getting justice is there if we follow procedure. Otherwise, there is no justice if it's separate procedure for everything, right? So Ambedkar wanted to achieve social justice and Rawls was just procedural. And even you can conclude with the preamble's ideas. If you are talking about Ambedkar towards the end, you can say that justice, first of all, after justice and colon comes in social, word social. So it's, if we look at it priority wise also, justice, social, economic and political. This is what is written. And before liberty and everything, first of all, what is written? Justice is the first keyword in the preamble. So justice, and then followed by social, economic and political. So first you have to determine social justice, then eventually it will lead to economic justice, because egalitarian society will be created, and only then you can actually have democracy intact, only then you can have political justice intact, right? Only then these people will be able to fairly elect their representatives or fairly stand up for the candidature, right? This was the idea. This is reading between the lines, fine. Then let's talk about the panchayats with gram sabhas. Question. So the question is, the panchayats with gram sabhas should be organized as to identify the resources locally available for the development in agriculture and industrial sectors. Examine the statement in the context of Gram Swaraj. Now, eventually, the whole statement with regards to your panchayat, under your Gram Sabhas, they are going to determine about the resources and then plan for the development. And then eventually, the idea is to please examine this statement with respect to Gram Swaraj. So basically, you have to examine the whole statement on the basis of Gandhian idea, right? So Gandhi ji wanted a self-sufficient village. If we want a self-sufficient village, which means first of all, you will have to identify what all requirements and resources are there in your village. Then you will need to have, if certain resources are there for which technical knowledge is required to actually make utilization, you will have to have all those technicians within your village. If you want clothes for the village people, you need to have all the tailors in your village. And once you identify what is the requirement and what all resources are available with you, you will start. So government does what? It gives skill training. So you will start promoting the aspects related to the same. You will plan your policies in that manner. Now this question could also be related to the India's scenario. Let's start from the planning commission era, if we have to actually go towards the criticism, because it's a longer question, right? It's a 250 word question. So you, towards the end, first of all, you explain what Gandhi wanted, what Gram Swaraj meant, and then you will say with Balwant Rai committee, this 73rd constitutional amendment came up and we have Panchayati Raj institutions, and this is the role. So basically you will try to tell the examiner that this was the idea and this is what they are doing. So basically it is from the Gandhian idea only that this Balwant Rai Mehta committee, it was inspired from Gandhian idea only, and the committee gave this recommendation and the government followed it up with 73rd amendment. And then if you want to criticize, you will tell that first of all there was planning commission which followed the bottom up approach, right? And now this has been changed with the advent of Niti Aayog, connected with the contemporary idea. As much as connections you can establish, as much as relevant you can make with the recent examples, the examiner will find something new in your answer rather than just theoretical vomit out. It will be great, right? So put across the example that today the actual identification of resources, planning, all of this is happening from the panchayat level, and suggestions are being sought by the current government, and Niti Aayog is following this procedure of empowering the Gram Sabhas to determine about the resources, determine about the plans, with plans regarding the development of the village, and the village is moving towards self-sufficiency. You can also quote certain schemes of the government if you have to, that incorporate the aspect of village self-sufficiency within them. Fine. Because you have to examine. If you have to examine it, you have to examine first of all from your contemporary political standing, right? So you have to come to the contemporary aspect, only then examination will be actually successful. Then let's examine the entitlement theory of justice. What is entitlement? Entitlement actually means when you think something you should get and you have not really done anything about it, or with regards to you deserving it, and yet you think you deserve it, right? That is entitlement theory of justice. Robert Nozick is someone who developed this theory. Robert Nozick developed this theory. He actually, now this is entitlement theory of justice. Oh, then this theory, what is its whole standing? There is a libertarian theory of justice. We just talked about John Rawls, right? He was developing this theory as a critique to libertarian theory of justice. Fine. So he will say that Rawls' theory is actually compromising liberty for the sake of equality. How? He was talking about procedural justice. He was going to follow equal procedure for, or alike procedure for everyone, right? And if someone comes to the state and says that it is injustice to me that certain people are having so much of property, I'm having nothing for my livelihood, the state will say, oh, let's follow the procedure and let's give him land. Some states will do so. If we go by procedure, then there is breach of liberty in this scenario, right? And in this case, he will say, what will libertarians do? They will do progressive taxation, right? To allow for equal opportunity. Again, equality is being more emphasized, but liberty is being compromised. If you apply for, progressive taxation, laissez-faire is being compromised big time, right? Because government is now interfering. If government is interfering, it is harmful for the laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is not working, so progressive taxation, all of these things, he is saying it's not correct. So entitlement theory of justice is based on certain principles. First of all, there is principle of acquisition. To this question, we'll have to give little more time, like 1 or 2 minutes extra as compared to other questions, because I'm afraid not well covered. Fine. So in a principle of justice acquisition, it deals with initial acquisition of the holdings, how the property got distributed first of all. Fine. It takes into account how people first came to own something or unown something. So principle of acquisition has to be taken care of first of all, if you really want to do a sort of justice, right? You cannot just take away something from someone and give it to somebody else. This is justice on him then. If he has got it hierarchically, he was entitled to get it. Now, he has not done something unfair. So he was entitled, right? So this is entitlement which is happening even in acquisition aspect. Right? Then there is, okay, now this property and all of these types, you have to see, has this person acquired somebody's property unfairly? Then he is done something in some injustice. If he has not done some injustice, why are you doing injustice to him? Because he must be entitled. That is entitlement theory of justice. First principle is acquisition. Then there is principle of transfer. I am just writing transfer because as a whole you can write it a principle of justice in transfer. Fine. So in this case, if you are acquiring the holdings, from another, whether it is happening voluntarily, willingly, or you are using coercion, if you are getting it transferred towards yourself by the use of force, then you are incurring injustice. Or if it is being given to you voluntarily, then it is just, nobody should take it away from you. Now you are entitled to it by the method of transfer, right? Again, entitlement has entered the story, right? See, now why it is being said so that who would come to you for this injustice? Because what happens is, generally, if somebody, a peasant was there, he was not able to pay tax or the, share to the zamindar. His land got confiscated, now it became part of zamindar's property. That is injustice. But if somebody was under the loan, willingly he sold his property, right, and acquired money, paid back the loan, and now if this person goes to the government and says, government, I don't have any land holding, how will I survive? Give me loan or give me property or give me monetary assistance, whatever he is asking for. He is saying some injustice has happened to me. No, nothing, no injustice has happened to you. Government should not be answerable, but government assists these people, and because mostly Rawls' principle of justice is being followed in the current world scenario. But Robert Nozick is saying what? This person lost the land, transferred the land, right? Why is government assisting him? It was entitled this way. He was entitled to transfer it with his free will. He did so. there is no injustice happening. There is entitlement that is working. If he was not entitled for selling of this land or transfer of land, how will he do it, voluntarily or involuntarily? He was entitled, he did it, and now he is saying we want more. Not fair. Fine. Now someone else is entitled to have it because he paid for it, right? Because resources are always limited. So you will, if you have to give it to him from somebody you will take, then it is injustice to him. So there is entitlement. Stop interfering. Fine. Then there is rectification of injustice, a principle which says let's rectification. Then there is rectification of injustice. So this is by Robert Nozick, please remember. Then he will say how to deal with these holdings. If something wrong you find, if the acquisition principle, till now we were speaking, if it's not been taken forcefully, if it's not been acquired illegally, what will happen if it's been acquired illegally? If the acquisition happened in an illegal manner, if the transfer happened involuntarily, it was injustice. How will you tackle, how will you rectify this problem of injustice? Then, if it is being done illegally, then you have to provide compensation, right? You have to deal with the transgressor also, the person who conducted the transgression, the aggression of this transfer, right? And if it, even if it is done by the government, it has to be dealt with the same way then. Because then you come and say कि developmental aspects के लिए government will acquire your land and it gives you lesser than market rate compensation, then it is also injustice. If you are saying that injustice is there, if acquisition is happening unfairly, then even from government it's injustice. So rectification should be done properly by dealing with the government even. Why you are not following that principle then? Again you are doing injustice, right? This is what Robert Nozick is putting. Now he has brought about government into the Katghara. Fine. So these are the three principles. Robert Nozick's theory of entitlement. What will be the critique? Liberals will say, what are you doing? State has to play the welfare role. It has to do something for the people and all of these things. Then Marxists will say, no, there is only one answer. Let's acquire all the sources of production, right? And feminists will say, listen Nozick, have you really thought about all the injustices happening to us throughout by the patriarchy? First of all, remove patriarchy, then let's talk. Right? So just think about different ideologies and put across a criticism, right? Fine. Okay.